She thought it was just another night, a chance to quietly blend into the crowd at a glittering mansion filled with the wealthy and powerful. But instead of respect, she was met with cruel stares, whispered insults, and a demand that stripped away her dignity. They forced her into the kitchen, treating her as if she didn't belong, as if her worth was nothing more than dirty dishes. What they didn't know was that one shocking truth would turn their arrogance into humiliation. How could they be so blind? And what happened when the truth finally came out? Amara had always carried herself with quiet strength. She wasn't born into wealth, but she built a life rooted in dignity and resilience. On most days, she worked hard, cared for her family, and kept her head high in a world that too often tried to push her down. That evening, she dressed simply but beautifully, stepping into a mansion alive with glittering lights, polished marble floors, and the laughter of people who believed they owned the night. To her, it wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about standing by her husband, a man she loved deeply, as he mingled in circles where power and money set the rules. No one in the room knew her name, and she was fine with that. But as eyes lingered longer than they should, whispers curled through the air like smoke. A shift was happening, one she could feel but couldn't yet place. What began as a night of elegance was about to twist into something far darker, an encounter that would test her patience, her pride, and her very humanity. The kind of night that leaves scars long after the party ends. At first, Amara tried to ignore it. The looks, the way conversations seemed to pause when she passed by. She focused on the music, the clinking of glasses, and the dazzling chandeliers overhead. But the whispers grew louder, heavy with judgment, as if her very presence was an intrusion. People shifted their bodies to block her path, their smiles masking disdain. She wasn't one of them, and they wanted her to know it. Then came the moment that changed everything. A woman in a sequined dress tapped her shoulder, her tone sharp and dismissive. "The dishes in the kitchen need attention," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. For a heartbeat, Amara froze. Surely this was a mistake. She wasn't staff. She was a guest. She was the wife of the man who owned the house they were standing in. But before she could speak, others joined in with cruel laughter, their mocking eyes pushing her toward the back of the room. Inside the glittering mansion, her dignity was being stripped away. Step by step, she felt herself pushed into a role she never agreed to, as though her worth was nothing more than the work they imagined for her. Every plate she touched, every glass she carried, was a reminder of the humiliation forced upon her. The smell of rich food mixed with the sting of shame. She kept her head down, not because she accepted it, but because she understood the danger of resistance in that moment. Whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs into open ridicule. A group of men raised their glasses, sneering, "Now the party feels authentic." The words cut deep, slicing through the air like knives. She wanted to scream, to fight back, to tell them who she really was. But her silence wasn't weakness. It was the storm gathering strength. Every second in that kitchen felt endless. Time stretched as the cruelty mounted, their arrogance feeding off each other. And yet, none of them had any idea. None of them knew that the very foundation beneath their feet belonged to the woman they mocked. The mansion, the glitter, the luxury. It was her husband's empire. And soon, that truth would break through their ignorance like a thunderclap. But in that moment, standing over soapy water and fine china, Amara carried the weight of every woman who had been told she didn't belong. Every person reduced to their skin color, every soul forced into silence. The room was growing restless, the energy shifting again. Something was about to happen, something none of them were prepared for. The question wasn't if the truth would come out, but when. And when it did, nothing in that mansion would ever feel the same again. The laughter reached its cruelest pitch when a guest raised a crystal glass and called across the room, she should be grateful to be here at all. The words echoed, bouncing off marble walls, each syllable landing like a slap. Amara's hands trembled over the sink, the sting of hot water mixing with the burn of humiliation. Her heart pounded, her chest heavy with anger she could no longer hide. And then, the moment of truth arrived. A hush spread through the party as the doors opened, and her husband stepped into the room. He was calm, powerful, every eye instantly drawn to him. Guests straightened their posture, desperate for his attention, eager to be seen in his presence. None of them realized the irony, that the woman they had mocked, degraded, and shoved into the kitchen was the one person who mattered most to him. He searched the crowd and found her. Their eyes met, her shame colliding with his fury. The silence that followed was suffocating. Without a word, he walked past the glittering gowns and expensive suits, ignoring their greetings, their shallow smiles. He stopped in front of her, his hand resting firmly on hers, lifting it away from the soapy water. The room seemed to freeze. Every guest now stood exposed in their arrogance, their whispers unraveling into nervous coughs and shifting feet. The weight of their mistake hung heavy, undeniable. The man they admired, the mansion they envied, the wealth they celebrated, it was all his. And the woman they tried to reduce to nothing was his wife. For the first time that night, Amara didn't lower her gaze. She stood tall beside him, her silence more powerful than any words she could speak. The room quivered under the truth, and the question clawed at every guest's mind. What happens when the people you belittle turn out to hold the very power you worship? The party didn't end in celebration. It ended in silence. No one dared to laugh, no one dared to whisper. The arrogance that had filled the air moments before had evaporated, leaving behind only shame and unease. Amara stood beside her husband, no longer invisible, no longer diminished. She had been forced into humiliation, but the truth had restored her dignity in a way no apology ever could. Yet the pain of that night lingered. The sting of being judged by her skin, the weight of being stripped of her humanity, it wasn't something that vanished when the guests left. Because her story wasn't just hers. It was the story of countless women and men, forced into silence, forced into roles they never chose, simply because of prejudice. And that's the haunting reality. Wealth, status, or power doesn't shield anyone from racism. It seeps into rooms glittering with chandeliers just as much as it hides in dark alleyways. What happened to Amara was more than one night of cruelty. It was a reflection of a system that still thrives on ignorance and superiority. So, the real question lingers long after the mansion lights dim. How many more will be mocked, dismissed, or humiliated before society finally learns to see people for who they are, not for the color of their skin? Her silence that night was not weakness. It was strength. And her story is not just a reminder of injustice, but a call for awareness. Because every act of cruelty tells us one thing: change is overdue. Will we let these stories fade into the background, or will we finally face them and do something about it?